Everyone ready?
Yes, ma'am.
From there, and
Yeah.
you get it, but
We'll just have to see.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Everett Public Schools Board of Directors regular meeting. I'd like to go ahead and read our closed caption disclaimer. Closed captioning is being provided by Zoom solely for the convenience of our viewers. Zoom closed captioning may not always transcribe accurately due to limitations of the machine-generated service. Everett Public Schools does not review for accuracy and makes no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, reliability, timeliness, or completeness of any information that appears in a closed caption. First, I would like to welcome Dr. Salzman from Chicago, Illinois. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to have the technology to be able to do this. And then I would ask that Director Mitchell read our land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, and Tulalip peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community.
Thank you. Will you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the Secretary please call the roll?
President Mason.
Present.
Vice President Lassane.
Present.
Director Berg.
present.
Director Mitchell.
Present.
Director Nichols. Student Representative Colley. Present. Student Representative Pilch-Basson.
Present.
Thank you. Our first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of tonight's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public. Good evening.
Wait just a moment, we don't have volume yet.
Okay.
Question. Did we lose connection?
I think we did lose connection on his side, so let me call him.
Certainly. Take a short pause.
As all of our staff knows, the technology is not always perfect.
Yes. Just when we thought we had it.
My Alexa, who stopped playing for some reason last night while I was cooking dinner. Oh. I was like, Alexa? She's like, yes. I'm like, why'd you stop playing music? I'm fine. Okay, can you play my music? And she started playing and then she'd go off again. I was like, maybe she doesn't like my singing. Waiting for Ian to join us. Technology difficulties, so you walked in at a good time.
Okay, I think in light of the technical difficulties we're experiencing until we get the volume
Can you hear me now?
issues resolved, I'm going to go ahead and just walk us through tonight's agenda. Adoption of the agenda. Tonight's agenda contains a segment for recognitions, the superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, a segment for routine business, a segment for information and discussion, a segment for new business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, no changes? Thank you. The following changes were made to the agenda. Item 7.01, Superintendent's Report. The presentation was added. Item 10.02, Approval of the Personnel Report. The Personnel Report was updated. And item 10.05, Approval of the Everett Association of Paraeducators Collective Bargaining Agreement. The agreement was added. At this time, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The agenda is adopted. How did I do, Dr. Salzman?
You're on mute, Dr. Salzman.
Might be talking to.
Yeah, they're still working on the volume issue, I think.
Oh, no, but it shows he's on mute.
Yeah, he's talking, I think he's talking to somebody else.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and move forward with tonight's agenda, and the next item is 6.0 recognition. And tonight we have the Washington State Art Educator of the Year in the room, and we are so excited to celebrate her. Dr. Bowden, please provide an overview and introduce our special guest.
Certainly. Good evening, President Mason, Board of Directors, and Dr. Salzman. Tonight, I have the honor of recognizing one of our amazing teachers, Ms. Cynthia Gaub, and I would like to ask Cynthia to join me at the podium this evening so that we could recognize her accomplishments. Each year, the Washington Art Education Association, or the WAEA, looks to honor outstanding art educators and art supporters in our state. This year, Ms. Cynthia Gaub was named the Washington State Art Educator of the Year for her contributions to educating, advocating for, and participating in visual art education. Educators receiving this award have extensive history of highly accomplished teaching, and Cynthia is no exception. She has been co-president and mentor to other leaders in her state association, as she has held leadership role for Choice Art Educators, a subgroup of the National Association as well. And since 2004, Ms. Gaub has taught exploratory arts, digital art, or a variety of media, in the Teaching for Artistic Behavior classroom by accessing studios and meeting challenges based on themes and genres. And as you can see, Cynthia is an amazingly passionate and dedicated teacher who serves our Everett Public Schools students. However, she is equally as passionate as a teacher leader in this field, sharing her knowledge with other educators across both this state and our nation. In the past, she has presented at the Washington State Art Educators Art Conference, as well as the National Art Educators Art Conference in New York City. She continues to present locally and nationally, including being a keynote speaker at the 2018 Teaching for Artistic Behavior Colorado Conference. She's presented virtually for the Art of Education and other state and national virtual workshops. In addition to all of this, Ms. Gaub also writes and receives grants for her classroom at both the district and state level. Heather Paddock, her principal at North Middle School, says, Ms. Gaub is the dedicated educator of the arts and always finds ways to bring out the most creative side in her students. We are privileged to have Ms. Gaub share her talents with students and staff at North Middle School, and we could not agree more. President Mason, Board of Directors, and Dr. Salzman, I hope that you will join me in celebrating the Washington State Art Educator of the Year, Ms. Cynthia Gaub.
Thank you. I've now worked for this district for, I don't know, going on 18 years, and it's my 21st year teaching. And I am never going to leave North because I have a beautiful new art room. And I live in the neighborhood, and I love our school, and I love our students, and I love helping them be creative. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you.
certificate of recognition for being named the Washington Art Education Association. Art Educator
Thank you.
Thank you all for that. It's just so wonderful to have some of our most talented instructors in the boardroom. So the next item of business is the superintendent report, and I was going to check in with Jared. It appears that we have not resolved our technology issues, so I would like to go ahead and delay the superintendent's report and hope that we can get those fixed and move to the next item, which is board. And, you know, I really want to relabel this one because it's board and student representative comments. So tonight, why don't I just start to my left and ask Director Lassane to start things off if you have anything you'd like to share or say.
Yes, we all said congratulations to Cynthia, and I would like to also say congratulations to all of our art teachers, all of our music teachers. The arts are especially important for students to ensure that they, I guess you would say, exercise both sides of their brains in school and become successful students in the arts as well as in regular education in humanities and sciences. So that's very important. I also had the opportunity to attend an instructional review at Emerson, and I do want to congratulate Emerson Elementary School on establishing a welcoming and belonging environment at their school for their students. It's a pleasure to always go to Emerson and to go to all of our schools, but it's amazing how it just takes a village to raise our kids and make them so excited in order to come to school. And Emerson is really doing that. So congratulations on the wonderful IR there. I would also like to say that this happens to be, I read somewhere, this happens to be October is Principal Appreciation Month. And I do want to say congratulations to all of our principals out there. We truly appreciate you because your work is long, it's hard, it's involving, and you have a way to make it such a joy. You know every kid's name, but first name, you know their problems and you know their successes, and you know how it's important to treat them with that welcoming sense of belonging to their school. So we appreciate you, all your principals out there. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Dr. Nichols.
Nothing in particular to report, but I did want to reflect on the holiday that we just had yesterday. And it's important to note that everybody got a day off of school, and state employees, federal employees got days off of work for Indigenous Peoples Day. And it's important that we recognize that our existence here as a nation is predicated upon taking lands and oppression of people that were here first, quite frankly. And to this day, particularly Indigenous women are not only discriminated against, but suffer higher rates of violent crimes, whatnot. So we have a lot of work to do in this area. And I hope everybody took some time over the last day or two to reflect on what we're doing to positively impact and change that relationship.
For that. I want to acknowledge too that people might have noticed that we did move the land acknowledgement before the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think it is in honor of the first people to this country, and that we were second. Our country was founded hundreds of years, thousands of years, because I can't do math, after they were here. Or first, I would just like to say that it was a pleasure going to the Cascade homecoming, seeing Director Lassane there and seeing Binta being recognized down on the field and participating, and then the Jackson homecoming. And I will say that my husband and I are definitely the jinxes for both of the teams because Cascade was behind at their homecoming when we left towards the fourth quarter, and then you won. And Jackson hadn't scored yet, and we left, and you scored twice. So we will leave all games early. And it's something that I noticed with Emerson starting their Spanish program and then helping in the vaccine program, when I cannot speak to another person in a language other than English, they say that if you have a goal, to tell other people so that other people can support you and maybe encourage you. So I am starting to learn Spanish. I got one of those little apps, and I'm going to try to figure out how to fit it into my day so that I can actually communicate with other people in a language other than English. So please hold me accountable or ask me how I'm doing, and do not expect a lot because this is an old brain. So thank you so much.
Wow. Well, I just feel like my directors covered so much of what I wanted to cover. So first off, thank you to Emerson for a fantastic IR. Myself and Director Lessons were able to be there. It was just a joy. It's beautiful seeing all of the signage that it's now bilingual. The students were happy and engaged, and it was truly going into the dual language classes. They were truly dual language. Like it was amazing to see the immersiveness and what the kids picked up. I also was able to go to the Heatherwood IR, which was great because I realized it had been in the before time since we had an in-person IR there. So I kind of had pulled out my notes from those before times to now, and being able to say, in 2 years, just looking at the changes, and honestly, the demographic changes were incredible. It's now a school that's majority students of color. And having a student having gone through Heatherwood, I would never thought I would have said that. So that kind of tells you where the demographics are shifting. It's beautiful and it's wonderful. I also want to recognize that yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day, and just give voice to folks who are voiceless. And I think it's powerful to talk about the issue of missing Indigenous women in our state. Our state has one of the highest rates of missing Indigenous women. So we really do need to elevate them and their voices and their stories. In addition to that, it was National Coming Out Day. So I want to say to all of our LGBTQ staff, students, everyone, just, thank you for your stories, and thank you for the folks who aren't telling their stories. I think it's just, for me, it's a day of inclusivity. It's a day that's really meaningful to so many families, and so many tears are cried of joy when people are able to live their full, authentic selves in the space that they inhabit. So it's amazing. I was not able to attend personally any of the homecomings, but I did hear great stories about FOCOs. Is that what the kids were calling them? So if you guys don't know what FOCO is, I highly suggest, but it was a huge success. I think one of the best thing about hearing the FOCO stories was that it was really natural for our students to get together in their groups and have fun, even though we couldn't provide it in a traditional sense. So even this coming up weekend, I've heard about a couple other FOCO gatherings. It's just a great way to know that we can make something that seems, very abnormal, a little more normal. So, and I just want to end with, I was just having a week where I thought, we're finally getting closer. And if any of you enjoy music, the song I was listening to, thinking about that, was Indigo Girls, Closer to Fine. And that's where I feel like we're just getting a little closer to fine. So thank you.
I just want to echo what previous directors have said about the Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday. I have nothing to add on that topic that would be of any particular insight, but I feel like it's necessary to emphasize that sentiment, so I wanted to. I was at the homecoming game on Friday, and I will say, Director Mitchell, that I would like to blame it on your luck, but Jackson's football team is a little bit beyond. Well, we've actually won a couple games this year, but yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to blame you for that.
I don't have that kind of power.
But yeah, I love that you brought up FOCO. That's something that me and my friends participated in. But I also want to highlight the things that my school did do. Jackson had its first ever homecoming parade, which was really cool because it was at like 9:30 in the morning and it was still very foggy. And so there's all these pictures of like the parade with the pine trees in the back and the fog, and it like matches the Jackson school colors, which I think is pretty cool. But that's like a tradition that I hope continues. And the homecoming game, I just had like the best homecoming weekend that I've had compared to freshman and sophomore year. Actually, it was a lot better, which I think partially is because I'm a senior and things are just naturally more fun. But I think, yeah, it's like really, really nice to see the way that people are making the most of things like that. And it was fun to dress up in a fancy dress and go to Din Tai Fung on Saturday night with just like my group of friends. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with Tara. It was one of the most fun homecomings that I had as well. Even though we didn't have a homecoming dance, the homecoming game was a lot of fun to be at. And we had a parade starting at Cascade. And we went and we decorated our cars, and then we all followed each other to the stadium. And it was just a lot of fun. And there's also another fake homecoming that's happening this weekend that I'm going to with my friends, so I'm excited for that one. But yeah, homecoming week was a lot of fun with the spirit days and the parade and the game all together. It was just a really fun week.
Thank you. There's so many going last. There's a lot said that I won't repeat. I did have the opportunity last week to attend both a instructional review at Evergreen Middle School and at Jackson Elementary School. And the thing that I let the teams there know is I just thank them so much for allowing directors to attend these instructional reviews. It might be a little what we like to call in the weeds in terms of our level of oversight, but it helps make the connection so real between what happens in the boardroom and what is approved and what is happening in the classrooms. And it just brings it all alive and into focus for me. And to Director Berg's comment, it allows us to see what our students look like and what they're doing. And I was able to walk into an English language learner, or it's called they've changed the acronym now, a multi-language learner, into a classroom where they were learning English, and it was a group of Spanish-speaking students who had recently come to our district. And it's just so powerful to see that in action. And I imagine the Emerson one was equally that way. So anyhow, I thank the staff for their patience and also their guidance in allowing us to attend those. So with that, I think, Jared, do we still have we're still not connected. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and move on to public comments. Do we have any public comments either virtually or in person tonight? Okay, no public comments, which takes us to the consent agenda. Would you like to provide an overview, Dr. Scott, of tonight's? Thank you.
Thank you. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts and grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of a routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report 1 or more weeks before the meeting. This gives directors time to ask questions or to consider a discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received and answered one question regarding items on the consent agenda. The consent agenda is presented as published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
There a second? I think I heard that. I was talking at the same. Okay, thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we will move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The consent agenda is approved.
Madam Chair, I have a point of inquiry. May we get the superintendent's report shown into the agenda, just for public record? There's a couple of items that seem like they'd be good to show.
We will, yes.
Okay.
And we are waiting actually to the end in hopes that we resolve our technology issues. And if we don't, I believe Dr. Scott
We'll go through it.
will go ahead and do his best to present on the fly. Okay, 11.0 is strategic progress monitoring. And tonight we do not have a strategic progress monitoring item, which takes us to 12.0 information and discussion. And tonight, Mr. Gunn is going to provide an enrollment update. Mr. Gunn.
Yes, thank you very much. So this is an enrollment update on the preliminary enrollment for us as of October 1st. This is something that we wanted to be sure to bring to you. There was, I think the last board meeting, there was some information provided about enrollment. That was I think it was the 8th day count, and now we're past the October 1 milestone date. So we have some preliminary information on that. The final, by the word, I've used the word preliminary a couple times. The final October 1 enrollments will be determined later this week and sent into OSPI, because our budget office has some very careful deliberations they have to go through to determine what the final October 1 enrollments are. So I want to be careful to use that the word preliminary. So the implications that enrollment have on our organization are far-reaching. About 82% of our total general fund revenues are impacted by the number of students that we receive. So we have a tremendous incentive to be as accurate as we can. It also affects facilities planning, capital bond, and levy planning, as you all are very aware of. It also goes into our thinking about what possible boundary revisions we may need to be making, where we would need to move portable classrooms and to buy and or sell property for future schools. It also has a direct impact on our capital facilities plan, which we update every 2 years, and this is the year of the update for that. So we'll be bringing that back in various forms for your review and approval by the end of this year. But the enrollment that we use in those, that we identify in those capital facilities plans go to determine how much impact fees we charge housing developers or housing projects to mitigate the impact of the students that live there on our school district. We also use enrollment projections to help us make decisions about program locations, where to move or locate programs, and also school transfer decisions, students that want to transfer to a different school, for example. Okay, so we wanted to get right to the point here. Les Kendrick is a consultant that works for us, and before I get into the numbers, I just wanted to take a minute and talk about Les Kendrick to make sure that you know who Les Kendrick is. He is a consultant that has worked for us since about 2009. He is the owner of Educational Data Solutions, a company that does this kind of work for a variety of school districts. I think, well, my information shows that he's worked for like 27 school districts around the Puget Sound region doing this work since 1997. Before then, for about 7 years, he was a demographer with the Seattle School District, and he also has a PhD in communication theory and research with extensive background in quantitative research and analysis. So that's a lot of fancy words there, but he basically knows this region very well. He's got his sources that give him all sorts of data about housing information, about birth rates, and about different other factors in area that go into predicting enrollments. And he does it, he's very, very good at it. He's been doing it for a long time.
Can I pause you really quick? I don't
Yes.
think this is displaying on Zoom, because usually it has that little box.
Would you help me, Shelley? Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mitchell,
You're welcome.
catching that.
Just getting used to that little Zoom box at the top.
Okay, you should be good now.
Thank you so much. Should I start over?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I didn't think so. Okay, so anyway, so the projections that Les Kendrick does for us every year, he gives us a high, medium, and low range projection. This year, because of the impacts of COVID, this year and last year, COVID had a definite impact on our enrollments. Les Kendrick recommended that for facilities planning purposes that we might want to use the medium range projection, and for budgeting and staffing purposes that we would probably want to use the low range projection. And so that is just what we did. So that's why at the last board meeting, I think Mr. Moore shared information with you that the projections that Les had done for us on the low range were relatively close to what they were actually planning in the budget process. You can see the actual enrollment, preliminary enrollment as of October 1 for the district was 19,633. That is about 202 lower than Les's low range projection, 555 lower than the medium range projection. And because it has to happen sometime, I suppose, OSPI was actually closer to the actual enrollments this year than Les Kendrick was. And we have talked with him about that, and he agrees that it is the case. The OSPI projection was only 2 off of the actual. So I wanted to also talk about which students are included in the October 1 preliminary enrollment counts and which ones are not. The preliminary enrollment counts do include 672 students enrolled in the Everett Virtual Academy, 101 students enrolled at Port Gardner School, and 376 students that live outside the district that have requested transfers and been approved to attend schools inside the district. These enrollment counts do not include the students that live inside the district and attend schools outside the district. There's 1,245 that have been approved for that. Also, students living in the district who have submitted a declaration of intent to homeschool, 554 students. Just a little bit of information on the homeschool numbers, and this trend is reflected also in the transfers in and out. So for the last 3 years, in 19 and 20, it was 484. Then it almost doubled during the first year of COVID in 2020-21. And then this year, it actually went back to what you would consider a normal growth rate from 2 years prior. So it kind of went up and then came back down. It's still showing a growth over a 3-year trend, but certainly it's starting, I would suggest that it's starting to kind of recover from the very impactful enrollment impacts that it had last year. So this is shows where we ended up. The columns that you'll see there show in October 1, 2020, the actual counts. And then again, we're comparing it to the medium range preliminary numbers. And then the actual. So you can see here that in this column here where it says difference from the October 1, 2020 actual, that is how much we actually grew. So even though we came in lower than we had projected we were going to, on the medium and low range projections, the district's enrollment actually increased since last year by 94 students. And you can see that most of that growth was at the elementary level, 159, declines at the middle school level of 89, and then growth of 24 at the high school. And just to come back to that, usually when I present information on enrollments, I'm talking about facilities, and we compare it to the medium range projections. So on the far right-hand side, you see how the actual numbers compared to the medium range projection that Les had done for us last year, and we're, again, 550 students lower than we had predicted based on those medium range projections. Now we look at accuracy over time for the medium range projections as of October 1st. And you can see on the far right-hand side, can I move this? I think I can move that. Okay, I'm going to move it over to here somewhere. For the last 2 years, in 2020 and 2021, and these are the October 1 numbers. So it's showing that as of October 1st on each of those years, this is what percentage less was off of the actuals. So you can see this year he was 2.75% off in terms of total numbers off of the actual numbers, and last year it was 4%. So the only way I can characterize those 2 years is that they are definitely impacted by COVID. And if you look at all the prior years in this whole string, it's a very small number as compared to the last 2 years, which is much larger than that. So on the chart on the bottom of the page then, we look at the enrollment headcounts for last year and this year, 2020 and 2021, again showing a change in this column of a total of 94 growth over last year. Our permanent capacity is 19,510. And so last year we were, if you look at district-wide, we were 29 students over capacity district-wide. And since we grew by 94, then we are 123 students over capacity now. And that's a district-wide look at it. We did not buy any portables, so we moved portables. And that's what you see on the far right-hand column is that to respond to the growth at the primarily at the elementary level, we moved 2 portables from Jackson High School to elementary schools to accommodate that. And so what you can see basically is that at the elementary level, this year we are still district-wide about 840 students over capacity by the students. And then middle and high schools, we are actually under capacity at those 2. So now I'm going to share some information with you, and what I really need you to understand is that this information here is no longer current. This information was based on an analysis of school districts across the Puget Sound region of their September official enrollment, which is the 8th day counts. And those have changed now, because one of the things that you'll see right down here says Everett Public Schools enrollment declined 1.2%. That was as of the 8th day of school, which was September, the official September count. That's why we use the October 1 every year, is that we tend to grow from September to October 1. Even though the information on the slide is out of date now, what it does show is how school districts' enrollment looked relative to each other. It's showing a trend. And the trend is that the larger districts are tending to lose enrollment, and the smaller districts, especially in the outlying rural areas, are tending to gain enrollment. And there are some possible reasons for that. One of those would be the increase of people that can work from home, virtual work environments. They don't have to necessarily live in the big cities to have a job anymore. Also, the housing in the outlying areas tends to be less expensive. Those are the 2 primary reasons that we're thinking of right now. Les is hopefully going to have some more insights for us when he does his enrollment projections. And we usually get those, by the way, around end of November, early December. And then we prepare that for board presentation in, I think it's March 8th is when it's coming to you. So next steps, I guess I just went over some of this. The projections will be finalized later this week by our budget office. Karen Buckman does a great job down in that department. and she'll be submitting that to OSPI. Updated projections based on everything that we're seeing will be provided to you on March 8th. And then also from February to June, enrollment projections, the updated one will be used in decision-making in all the areas that I've talked about: staffing, budgeting, transfer decisions, program locations, facilities planning, and portables. And then we also, every year, we adjust the staffing based on the actual enrollments that we receive. We redistribute staffing as needed to be where the students are. And that concludes my presentation, and I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for that information. I'm going to go ahead and start with questions. I'm curious about the high school enrollments because we implemented boundary changes. Are we in our third year of that change? Second year?
I think we're in the second year of that.
Okay, and sort of how the redistricting has impacted potential out-of-district transfers, and sort of, I guess at the end of the day, what I would really enjoy seeing is maybe in a Friday report or something, is a follow-up on what enrollment looks like at each high school right now. Has the boundary change really done what we thought it was going to do in terms of level that out, or were out-of-district transfers a bigger impact to the Jackson community once they realized that they would be traveling north? They decided to go, to a local or a close-by district. I'm guessing you don't have all those numbers about exactly where everyone went, but I'm just kind of curious about the trends around the high school enrollment, where we are. And then just my other question is around homeschooling. I'm surprised to see the 2019-20 school year at 484, because I understand the big jump last year. And I understand that some people are continuing to do that this year because of the unpredictability of the COVID virus. Mm-hmm. But have we always had that many, I guess, or have we always reported sort of a high level of homeschoolers? And I'm kind of wondering where that trend is right now.
Yeah, we included, as you just saw, the information from the last 3 years. I did not bring with me the information prior to that, and I can do that, along with the information on the high school enrollments.
Okay. Yeah, that's just helpful in understanding. I guess I'm reading a lot of articles right now about, trending higher levels of homeschooling once people got into it, and it really worked well for a lot of families, and whether that's, that's going to be a Les Kendrick kind of equation to figure out
yes,
when he starts predicting enrollment. But I guess just for me, I'm more curious.
I'd like to piggyback on that question. Please explain to me, and maybe somebody else can, because I was under the impression that those students who are homeschooled through the Port Gardner program still had a connection to Everett. When you look at the numbers now show that 554 have made a declaration of intent to homeschool. Does that mean they are no longer connected to Port Gardner and the district, and so they're going elsewhere for their homeschool curriculum? How do we explain that number? Because I was under the impression Port Gardner was here for homeschooling, and there was still a connection with homeschooling and the district. So is that where the numbers are so different now?
So let me make a couple clarifications. And the declaration of intents filed by parents of students who want to be homeschooled, those students are not counted in the Port Gardner numbers. They're separate. So if they're counted in the Port Gardner numbers, then they're not including the numbers of students that we show that have that filed the declaration of intent. So I think that provides some of the clarity that you were asking for. In terms of the information about changes over time, I don't have that information with me.
So Port Gardner essentially not homeschool students?
I can explain if you
Yeah.
want. Do you want me to explain that one? I can take this one, sorry, because this is all, we did this for about 13 years. So Port Gardner is a parent partnership, and because it's a parent partnership, and so it falls under ALE laws. And so basically, as a parent, you have to choose. If at the age of 8 or beyond, you say, I want to declare what's called an independent homeschooler, that's that 554 number. So those kiddos are not going anywhere in the state. The state money is not following them to any other partnership. It's just gone, they're homeschooling. If you go to Port Gardner, you're actually going to a public school, but it's a parent partnership. So you sign a contract saying, look, we're going to be in this together, and we're going to do monthly WSLPs, weekly contact requirements, as well as a procurement aspect, as well as a choice of classes. And the choice of classes at that point, and this is where it gets confusing, can be 0. So you could say, I'm not going to take any classes, but I will have contact, and that fulfills that state requirement, but I'm going to, in essence, homeschool my kids. So that's kind of the difference. So those 554 are just gone to the wind. But there's all sorts of parent partnerships. So other kids, and that could be what Caroline's looking at, the folks who we don't have here, if we look and see what the variance numbers are, that'll tell us if these kiddos made other choices, which might be other parent partnerships across the state. So they can choose Orcas, they can choose Ording, they can choose Edmonds, Shoreline, they can choose any partnership they want in the state.
So do we know how many of these 554 students were at one time enrolled in Port Gardner program and so are now seeking elsewhere?
Most of the time, they're not. So the independent homeschoolers tend to stay away from traditional parent partnerships, just as it's like that's an anecdote that I think is based on somewhat statistics. They don't leave Port Gardner and homeschool. Normally, they don't go there, period. But at the age of 8, they have to sign the paperwork to the state saying, this is what we're doing, just so we know they're getting some kind of education.
And anecdotally, too, there are a number of families that you've heard about, they pull their kids completely out of, they were going to an elementary school, pulled them out, and now are homeschooling. So never part of a program, full school to no school.
Yep.
And COVID just taught you could do this in an RV, you could do this on a boat, you can do it on a desert. And so it just, the freedom, there's more parents are choosing what's right for their family. I have a couple questions.
Did you have any follow-up question on that?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
I just have a question about the enrollment from 19 to 21, about 600 kids down-ish. Do we know, I mean, a couple hundred went to homeschool now, but do we know where all those 600-ish are, the 2,600 to the 1930, and my math could be wrong. But do we know, are they officially homeschooled? Did they move to those other districts? Do we have landing points for every single one of those kids we lost?
No.
Okay.
This is preliminary information. Again, Les Kendrick does shed some light on some of the questions that you're all interested in and asking about. That will come about when he does his kind of more regional evaluation.
Oh, I'm not talking about that. No, I'm talking about the kids that were actually here in 2019 and the kids that are preliminary here now. We're down about 600. So I can't imagine they all just graduated. I can't imagine 100 of them probably are now homeschooling. So do we know where those, it's on the top of slide, whatever slide number this is, 7. In 2019, 20,169 to 2021, 19,633. So it's about 600 kids that have gone someplace.
So one thing to keep in mind is they aren't necessarily the same kids, because every year you have a graduating class that goes away, and you have an incoming class of kindergarten students.
Yeah, I know, but we were growing and now we shrunk. And I just struggle with the fact that I think our shrinking was years from now. So
Yeah.
Shelley wants to say something.
Sorry, as I hover.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that actually we have the information about the students who we had enrolled here.
Okay.
And that who are no longer enrolled here and they are either attending somewhere else, and we can get the board that information.
Oh, I don't want to know. I just want to know that we know where they are.
Yes, we have reports that we run that track where students were in our system, and if they're not returning to our system and they're in different systems, we have reports that run that.
Thank you. That's just the royal. We know where those students are. They graduated or they transferred.
Yes.
We royal know where they are.
We run those reports and we get them relatively regularly so that we know where students were, and we can track them where they go into the state, to the other areas of the state system.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. That was just my concern.
Can we track how many students were at Port Gardner, say back in 2019? And then, because it shows that right now there are 101 students at Port Gardner right now. So can we find out what the numbers were then pre-COVID, and find out what the status, why it dropped so far down to 101?
If it did, we don't know if we did.
Yeah, wait, I'm not sure.
You only have one point in time, you don't know if it shrunk.
Say again?
You only have one point in time, you don't know if it shrunk. But you're asking for more points in time so you can see a trend? On that one slide, he only gave us 1 point in time for Port Gardner.
Where are you looking, Pam?
I'm looking at the 2021, October
On slide 5.
You have 101 students enrolled at Port Gardner School.
How do you know that shrunk? That number is a shrinking number.
It's only 1 point.
It says the preliminary enrollment counts includes 101.
Yeah.
Right.
So the 101 students enrolled at Port Gardner, that's been a relatively stable number for, I'd probably say, the last decade. But if you're interested in looking at the trends of enrollment at Port Gardner, we can provide the board that information.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would just ask, maybe a rhetorical question, but, having staff run that information, those numbers, what information is that going to provide that would then
it shows a trend, and the trend is, in my understanding of the impact of Port Gardner has on those students or those parents in the district who want to homeschool their students through a program here in Everett. And the question is, were we able to even acknowledge or provide that information to the 554 people who chose not to enroll in any kind of program that was available here in Everett, a potential homeschooling program, and they chose to go elsewhere?
So we informed the public of options that we had. So Port Gardner is our parent partnership program, and so it is a little bit broader definition than just homeschool. There is a higher level of participation for our parents in that program, as opposed to just the declaring the intent to homeschool a student and not having a partnership with a current school district. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you ask is, did parents have the option to enroll in Port Gardner? Did they have the option to enroll in EVA, in the Everett Virtual Academy? And did parents have to choose neither of those options, did not choose brick and mortar school and chose to go somewhere else? We can't necessarily track where they went unless they went into one of our state school districts. So for example, Washington Virtual Academy is run by the OMAC School District. Our statewide student information system allows us to track if a student left the Everett Public School System and went to the OMAC Public School System in that program. But the answer to your question of, did we provide parents the opportunities for other virtual options? Yes.
I have a follow-up. Is that
Yeah, go ahead, please. And thank you also for that information earlier. That was very helpful.
Yeah, no,
in understanding.
And so, because I think Director Lissens is hitting on something that I was going to hit on. So if I do the numbers right, so you've got Everett Virtual Academy, you've got Port Gardner, and you've got some traditional independent homeschoolers. And so that's 1,327 students that are right now not choosing a traditional way of learning for a variety of reasons, right? And so there could be an opportunity to reach out to those families to let them know what opportunities we have here. It sounds like EVA may or may not be permanent. I hope it is permanent because I think it's a great option. But I think that, and I've said this before, Port Gardner is an untapped resource, and we are losing students left and right to parent partnerships that are robust and all-encompassing across the state. And at this moment in time, I think there is an absolute opportunity to reach out to those 554 families who have raised their hand and said, we want to homeschool. But for a lot of them, they don't understand that you can do that and be a part of a system and still teach the curriculum you want to teach. There's a lot of myths out there. And I, happily myth bust all the time about parent partnerships in the before times when I could actually go into hair salons and literally talk to parents about what parent partnerships are and what they can do for your child, because I think it's important for them to have a connection with their public school district. So for that 1,327 students, and I use that number because I think our EVA students might make options like the Washington Virtual Academy if they don't understand that they could, in essence, use a Port Gardner in that way. So another number I'd love to see, and I think Director Mason has asked for it, is kind of that variance number, because that's going to tell us how many students are asking for variances to other districts. And there'll be things that we can see, and there'll be things that we can surmise. And depending on the district, you can pretty safely surmise if they're doing it for a parent partnership. Now, you might say, oh, it's, for this resource or that. But if you tell me that we have X going to the Edmonds School District on a variance, I'm going to tell you it's for their parent partnership. More likely than not. I know North Shore just opened one. They opened it because parents got sick of driving to other ones. It's successful. Shoreline has one that they pinpointed into K-8 because they said, wow, we're losing students to Edmonds and other ones. So at this point in time, when we're looking at enrollment declines and parents making decisions, I'd ask for not only that data, but just kind of that retooling of our thinking about this 1,327 students that I would love to see come back to our district.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? I think I would just like to end with just looking at the elementary numbers. We are still about 2 small elementary schools over enrollment at the elementary level. And as we consider capital plans in the coming months here, that is something that I think directors need to continue to keep top of mind. It would be really nice to get some of those students out of the portables and in permanent classroom spaces, which I think is always preferred by the teacher and the student and the family. So thank you very much to both of you for stepping in and helping out with some information. Thank you, Mr. Gunn, for...
Sorry, I actually did have, that just reminded me of something I want to ask about. Sorry, I know it's kind of elapsed that period of time, but going to Jackson and seeing the almost 20 portables every day, which I'm finally lucky enough for my first year at Jackson to not have any portable classes. I wanted to sort of ask about how the losing those 2 portables has affected classroom sizes at Jackson. I know there have been a couple issues, like in my class, there was an entire English class that was over capacity and ended up like collapsing on like the 3rd week of school. They like deleted an entire English class and rearranged all those student schedules. And just a lot of classes that I've seen, this might just be a feeling of not being used to being in a classroom setting, but a lot of them feel like there's more people in all of my classes than there have been in the past, and I'm not. I'm just curious about those numbers, if I could get those on how the losing those 2 portables and that in tandem with enrollment numbers and variances in homeschooling and things like that. If losing those 2 portables has had an even greater effect on Jackson's overcrowding, because as nice as it is to have all in building classrooms, it's a sacrifice that you're making if that is at the expense of losing 2 teachers at that school, if that makes sense.
It does. And we can...
my guess is that once, if Mr. Gunn's going to follow up with high school enrollment figures, we'll have a better understanding of that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
President Mason, may I ask for, I think we might be ready for a sound check for our superintendent here, is the word I received. Jared, is that true? I think he's on. Dr. Salzman, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? No, you guys can't hear me at all?
No, we can't.
My apologies then. Keep rolling.
Okay. Apologies, Dr. Salzman. Sorry, the technology is not working like it should. We'll go ahead and move forward to 13.0, which is unfinished business, and tonight we do not have any unfinished business, which brings us to new business, and we have 3 policies to review, and I believe Mr. Fleckenstein is making his way to the podium to walk us through those.
Well, good evening. First, new policy 2108, Learning Assistance Program, is proposed this evening to comply with House Bill 1208, which provides school districts more control of LAP funds for the purpose of identifying and addressing deficits in students' basic skills resulting from or exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Learning Assistance Program, or LAP, is a state-funded program developed to provide supplemental instruction and services for public school students who are not meeting academic standards and basic skills in reading, writing, and mathematics. The proposed new policy, 2108, has been reviewed by legal counsel and the Superintendent's Executive Cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Directors, are there any questions regarding policy 2108? Hearing none, we'll move that to second reading.
Thank you. Revisions to Policy 3430, Comprehensive Safe Schools Plan, comply with House Bill 1216. Revisions include updating several drill requirements and areas of safety preparedness in the existing policy, including planning for a variety of emergencies that school districts may face, including pandemics. The revisions to Policy 3430 have been reviewed by legal counsel and the Superintendent's Executive Cabinet prior to tonight's meeting. And so the revisions here, as you can see, are of the major basic functional drills we already do in Everett Public Schools and are required by state law: shelter in place, lockdowns, evacuations, earthquakes. So for our student representatives, I'm sure you're very familiar with those drills at your schools. I see your nodding heads and enthusiasm.
This is essentially a complete rewrite, right?
It is an update and more comprehensive within the policy language. That's correct, Director Lassane.
Are there any questions regarding policy 3430? Okay, we'll go ahead and move it to second reading.
Thank you. And finally tonight, proposed new policy 5515, Workforce Secondary Traumatic Stress, complies with substitute House Bill 1363, which aims to address secondary traumatic stress, or STS, and its toll on the K-12 workforce via the adoption of this policy and its related procedures, so that districts and schools can take meaningful steps in supporting their staff's health and well-being in response to compassion fatigue and to create sustaining environments that are physically and emotionally healthy for staff. Interventions as a revision or adoption of this new policy include implementation of the policy, a continuous improvement process for the maintaining and promotion of emotionally and physically healthy staff, and professional learning for staff to address secondary traumatic stress. New policy 5515, Workforce Secondary Traumatic Stress, has been reviewed by legal counsel in the Superintendent's Executive Cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment. I think this is just so needed and so great that the state legislature took action on this, especially during these times. It couldn't be more relevant and timely.
Mm-hmm. Who's making up the workforce or the task force going on with this?
Once adopted, we will work with our district stakeholders for this. Primarily, though, because it's around workforce and wellness and health, it'll be a multi-departmental group that comes together. But once adopted, we will put it together, and it does require an update at least one time a year to the board. So we'll keep you apprised of our work.
I have a question, but unfortunately it's on the previous policy. Something just jumped out at me that I just had a question about, so I don't want to ruin the flow, but.
I think let's, if there's no further questions on this policy, then we'll go ahead and move this to second reading and go ahead and address.
And it's just a question. It doesn't fundamentally change anything. It's just the reunification. I just realized it states Everett Memorial Stadium for reunification. And my brain just went to, our schools. It's 3 buses for a family to get from Jackson High School to the city of Everett on a good day. So I'm just thinking, has there been any thought of potentially making a north and maybe a middle and south reunification point?
Currently, as the policy exists, our reunification plan is for Everett Memorial Stadium based on several factors. One, obviously size, and the ability to get in and out traffic more cleanly. Your concern, or question, I should say, has been brought up in the past in terms of proximity. If the entire district were to be impacted all at once, how we would do that. So I will take your feedback back to the District Safety Committee.
And just for clarification, I guess part of it was if there's an issue at, let's say, Jackson, the reunification, so let's say it's not a district-wide event, but it's an event at Jackson or one of our north or south end schools, would the reunification point per this policy still be Everett Memorial Stadium?
If it requires them to completely evacuate the Jackson High School grounds, the answer would be yes.
So
if it only requires them to evacuate the building, which we already have evacuation plans for the fields at Jackson, then we would do a reunification from Jackson's fields.
But if they had to if they had to leave Jackson completely, like in terms of there was a very large fire or something to where, and to the unthinkable, but if they had to leave completely, then the students that left, we would bus them to Everett Memorial Stadium, and the parents would be expected to go to Everett Memorial Stadium to reunify with their students, as this is current.
Currently a full Jackson High School site evacuation.
Or any of our schools.
Any school right now.
I would respectfully ask for the committee to look at that. I don't know how that actually would be physically possible for many of our families living in that part of the district who rely solely on public transportation to get to their children. And I'm just thinking, I mean, my brain's breaking thinking about it. So that would be great to maybe in a Friday report, just if the committee could look at some place, there's got to be some place on the south end. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Think for fish. Thank you very much. The overview. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move back to our superintendent's report. And we have our deputy superintendent, Dr. Scott, here to provide that for us this evening. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. If we're going to load up the presentation here. Thank you, President Mason. I'm going to channel my inner Dr. Saltzman here and get enthusiastic about North Middle School playing its first home football game on that beautiful field. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that beautiful field. It's called the Bagshaw Field, which was replaced as part of the 2016 bond. Look at those pictures. It's an immaculate, immaculate field. Wanted to thank our voters in the community for supporting this improvement. Enoch Bagshaw, this little bit of fun fact or trivia, was the Everett High School football coach that won the National High School Football Championship 100 years ago in 1921.
Wow.
So that's
cool.
That's the namesake for the field. And we're really, really excited that the kids are able to enjoy this beautiful facility.
The envy of all middle schools.
Envy of all middle schools. And I think that team is too. They look really tough there. The guy rounding the corner going for the touchdown. Moving on, our next Let's Connect with the Community is Monday, October 18th. And the discussion is going to be about belonging and inclusiveness. And this is kind of an extension of our Learning Improvement Day across the district on October 15th, which we're really excited about. So check our website out for the Zoom login information. And finally, we would be remiss if we didn't recognize our incredible assistant principals and principals. This is Principal Appreciation Month. Principals and assistant principals are the lifeblood of this district. And Dr. Saltzman reminds us of that many, many times, that they are the engine that drives our organization forward each and every day on the ground, in the field. We have amazing administrators here, and we are so, so grateful for their work, their courage every day in unprecedented times, loving students, loving the community, and taking great care of the teaching and learning in their buildings. So happy Principal Appreciation Month. And that concludes our report.
Thank you very much. Our next item of business is upcoming agenda items, and that is typically Dr. Saltzman. Would you like me to provide an overview, or do you have that?
Have that, darling? Oh, I do. Thank you. So thank you, Madam Chair. Item 1501, our regular meeting on October 26, which is 2 weeks from today. The board will discuss capital levy proposal, education programs and operations levy proposal, and the highly capable program grant.
Thank you. Item 16.0 is executive or closed session, and tonight we do not have either, which takes us to item 17.0, and that's adjournment. I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening, a nice short meeting, and I hope you have an opportunity to go home and spend time with family and loved ones. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.